So now let's talk about promoting resiliency. What are some small steps that we can do to take care of our young people? Effective clinical care and easy access to that care for mental, physical, and substance abuse disorder is a right of all young people. As service providers, it's our duty to support young people and first do no harm. Again, providing access to that care is a part of our responsibility. Also, restricting access to highly lethal means of suicide, that could be poisons, firearms, etc. And building strong connections through community support, encouraging family support, and social support. Developing skills in problem solving. It's interesting because this is something that a lot of people just kind of forget with the millennial generation. Think about it. In 1980, how did you find a book in the library? There was a long, drawn-out process of identifying a card in, dozens of boxes in a card catalog. You have to know something about the subject, something about the title, the author maybe, a little bit about what you're looking for. Hope that you find the right card, correlate that card with a map of the library, find that shelf, and hope somebody didn't misplace it. Now what today do kids have to do? Google search a fragment of a sentence in quotes that came up in the book anywhere, and they can find that book, or resources that are very similar to what they're looking for. What's the point of all of this? Young people are lacking those problem-solving abilities because a lot of the basic everyday tasks don't go through the step-by-step process that a lot of service providers did when they were young. What can we do to promote resiliency? We can help young people iron out those individual step-by-step in order to create resiliency and problem solve for themselves. And also cultural and religious beliefs that discourage suicide and support self-preservation. Encourage young people to reach out to welcoming and affirming supportive environments that ultimately promote resiliency for their identity. Slide. We also want to encourage family, community, and school support. LGBT youth that are able to reach out to their families, their community, their school, their social group, feel less isolated and less alienated. And we know from our call volume, the most common topic area received on the Trevor Lifeline is the sentiment of, I'm an LGBT person in X city and I'm totally alone. We know that's not true, so what we can do is build up these networks and build that social area for young people that increases the sense of isolation and promotes resiliency, ultimately leading in less negative mental health outcomes. Having positive media representations is also very important. As a service provider, knowing what LGBT programming looks like, knowing what's appropriate for your age demographic and that target audience, and talking about positive portrayals of LGBT people in the media ultimately helps reduce the feeling of invisibility that a lot of young people have. We already talked about supporting social networks and developing coping mechanisms a little bit, but noting positive reframing, strengthening social supports, and identifying positive LGBT role models both in the media and in your community. Slide. So safe messaging. What exactly does that mean? Well, we know there's been a massive amount of media publicity lately on LGBTQ suicide, on bullying, and what are our responsibilities as service providers to make sure that we are not contributing to contagion and we're not contributing to negative mental health outcomes. Being gay does not necessarily mean being suicidal. We do not want to send a signal that suicide is a common or normal consequence of being bullied or being discriminated against, because ultimately and unfortunately we know that teasing and some of the bullying behaviors are common in young people. I'm pretty sure everyone can think of at least once or twice that somebody said something that hurt your feelings. And just because that doesn't happen does not necessarily mean that a young person is going to attempt suicide or even have negative mental health consequences because of that. It's the compilation that we're talking about, the environmental messages, the negativity from multiple social groups on the basis of LGBT identity that contributes to risk. We want to make sure that we're not simplifying the issue to be, oh, well, gay equals depression equals suicide. It doesn't work that way. We want to ensure that we're really sensitive to the needs of a grieving family and a community. We're not displaying pictures of young people who have completed or attempted, and we're not, glamorizing suicide or death. We want to shape our conversation around the need for change to occur in order to protect young people for the future and positive values. So there's a double need for safe messaging due to identity formation in young people. So I'm going to reference Vivian Cass's model of identity development and the pride stage. While young people are coming out, they'll go through they will go through identity development. They'll go through multiple stages in that development, but one of them is called pride stage. And while sometimes coming out arrives in that main thinking of a young person is, I've got to tell everyone who I am, that person tends to divide their thinking into binary worlds of heterosexual and homosexual, and is immersed in the LGBT culture while minimalizing their contact with heterosexual individuals. And sometimes that comes the us versus them qualities of political and social viewpoints. So I bet all of you are thinking, what is the point of this? Well, the point of this is when you have a young person in a classroom and the only time that you're talking about LGBT needs is when there's bullying in your school, or when there's a hate crime, or when a young person completes suicide, or when you see something going on in the media like we saw in October, and that's the only time it comes up, the indirect message that we're portraying is gay people are victims. Gay people complete suicide. And we know as educated consumers of information that that's not true. So I want to encourage and support all of you service providers for being on this webinar today and ensuring that messages of LGBT hope and LGBT equality are distributed throughout your interactions with young people and not just in a negative light while displaying safe messages. Slide. So I want to talk a little bit about policy. I'm not going to get too deep here, but the Safe Schools Improvement Act, it amends the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. The legislation is long overdue for reauthorization and is likely the vehicle for a couple different acts to require states to have LGBT inclusive policies on an ongoing basis. It will require collection and reporting of certain information on bullying and harassment by youth in elementary and secondary schools as well as in the community. And it will also conduct and report the results of a needs assessment for bullying and harassment prevention programs and provide technical assistance to local education agencies and schools in the effort to thwart bullying and harassment and victimization. And it's on the basis of race, religion, ethnicity. It's a variety of different identities. So the Tyler Clementi Higher Education Anti-Harassment Act, sorry, that's a mouthful, focuses on amending Title IX, Student Assistance of Higher Education Act of 1965, and requires educations of higher education that participate in the program and receive funding from that program to prohibit harassment of students by other students, faculty, and staff, and provide a description of the programs that they are using to prevent said harassment. And it requires, it will develop a program for granting for young people and organizations focused on preventative measures of cyber